Hello and welcome to the Womb Centered Healing Podcast. I'm Sama Morningstar and I have Anita with me here today. Thank you so much for joining us, Anita. And I met Anita through the Women Who Boss Up book, collaborative book project. Um, and I've been interviewing, you may have heard other interviews on the podcast here with others of those collaborative book series. And so Anita wanted to come on the podcast as well and share about her womb-centered healing journey. So Anita, please do introduce yourself a little bit more and share about your womb-centered healing journey.
Hi, Salma. Thank you so much for having me. I'm very excited for our conversation. I am Anita Chan. I am a licensed esthetician and an owner of Anita B Spa in San Francisco. And my profession has been in the beauty wellness industry. I've been in it for over 20 years, starting with my own journey of skincare and trying to treat and maintain my own acneic skin. So that's really kind of where my journey began. And then, of course, yes, like you said, I'm part of that collaboration of Women Who Boss Up, which I'm really excited about because it's a collaboration of women from all different walks of life who have journeys that brought them to where they're at. So thank you so much for having me and allowing me to be part of your conversation.
Lovely. Thanks for joining us. And so I would love to hear more about um, how your wellness journey began. We were talking before we started the recording about your journey with acne and your skin and how that got you into your profession of becoming an esthetician, and that it might not have started out that way, but you along that journey started to recognize that the healing that needed to happen was deeper than the skin, and that it was related to your hormonal rhythms. And so I'd love for you to tell a story about those beginning discoveries of, well, first of all, needing to heal what was going on in your skin, and how you started to recognize that it was a little deeper and that maybe it was connected with your womb. You might not have known it then that it was connected with your womb, but now you can reflect back and say, oh, those hormonal imbalances with my cycle I was noticing. So I'd love to hear about that.
Yes, of course. So I began in the industry when I was 14 at a summer job. I worked at a company called Bare Essentials, and I was fortunate that that company had a lot of focus on not only makeup. Now they're more focused on makeup, but back then it was all about wellness and self-care. And so that's what started my journey in this industry. And so I then turned a little bit more focused on makeup. But while I was doing makeup, and this is when I was at Sephora, I had realized what the fundamentals of makeup was and what everybody, that wanted to do makeup, what their purpose was. And it was actually to create flawless skin, right? So they are using the topical makeup to create a look of healthy skin. So me, myself, being a makeup artist, I was talking to clients about how to create this flawless look while myself, my skin was just completely broken out. And I realized, okay, well, they're not going to believe me if I am preaching about healthy skin when my own skin is not doing so great. So from there, when I went to college, I had decided to create my own major because I realized that there wasn't one major that fit what I wanted to study. And so my major is called Fundamentals of Self-Image, which is a mix of health psychology, marketing, and sociology. And so through those courses, especially with the health psychology, I took a lot of nutrition courses. I then realized it dawned on me that, okay, well, skin is an organ. It's one of the biggest organs in our body. And even though it is what wraps our body, there's many layers of our skin. And there's a huge connection between our skin and what goes on internally, meaning the rest of our organs, so our gut, our hormones, and then our mind, the mental health. And so from there, I started to really pick out and realize certain foods that were irritating to me. And one of the biggest ones that we all know is peanuts. A lot of people have peanut allergies. And when I tell people, oh, I have a peanut allergy, they automatically think, oh, well, do you get to the point where you can't breathe or do you need an EpiPen? And I'm like, no, no, it's not to that extreme. But I know that when I eat peanuts and even something like peanut butter, I will break out. And so I always say, well, it's just a cosmetic allergy, but it does cause me to break out. And so from there, I started looking into, okay, what makes me break out? Other things like dairy would, I'm a little bit lactose intolerant. So that made my stomach not feel good. And so whenever I wasn't feeling well, my skin would not look good. So when I'm sick, or in the theory of skincare is always about balance. And so I noticed that, okay, well, when I'm sick, my skin doesn't look that good. Or when I drink more water, when I sleep more, that actually plays an effect in my skin. So that is really how I started to realize and start looking more into the connection between our womb, our internal health, in correlation to our skin health.
Mm. And I'm curious about how you started to discover the hormonal relationship and what you learned, what you learned initially, and what you've learned over the years of your professional involvement about the hormonal rhythms that womb bearers have and how that affects our skin. And we know it affects certainly our digestion and all of this. I'm just curious what you've learned about, and I can I can talk about it as well.
Yeah, so I would say the biggest lesson, and when I first learned it, was a job that I had working with Suzanne Summers' doctor, the one who did the bioidentical hormonal treatment. And through that job, that's when I learned a bit more about hormones and how it plays in our skin. And so things like, for example, with our menstrual cycle from days 1 through 7, we don't produce as much estrogen. So that causes our skin to be more dehydrated, and it doesn't absorb nourishment so much. So why is it that a lot of teenagers, once they get their period, their skin starts to change? And so through working with clients that were in all different phases of hormone shifts, that's when I really looked into, okay, well, within the different days of our menstrual cycle and when we're off of our menstrual cycle, when our body produces more like progesterone or testosterone, what effects does that have, and how can we support the body? So we can't, necessarily change what the body naturally does, but we can support it so that it can give us the results that we're looking for. So
Mm.
that, yeah.
So when you have clients come in, do you ask them where they're at in their menstrual cycle, what day they're on?
Absolutely. It's always a question that we ask. So, from where they're at in their menstrual cycle, to even, are they planning to get pregnant? Or if they are pregnant, we will treat the skin differently. So, because there are sensitivities, there are changes in the body during those phases. It's very important for us to know, as an esthetician, what is going on so that we can, once again, like I said, support the body rather than try to, force the body to do something that it's not ready to do.
Mm-hmm. Now, you talked about nutrition a lot, and I work with my womb centered healing clients a lot around nutrition and how to support the body from the inside, um, particularly around hormonal balance and working with the liver, um, and with working with the liver, there's a big, and with anything, there's a big emotional component, and hormonal imbalances tend to be related to um, and influencing liver stagnation, which is a big part of how things get out of whack with our hormones. And one of the main reasons that I talk about all the time with my students and clients that we have hormonal imbalances, and that shows up differently for different people. For some people it shows up in the skin, for other people it shows up in the womb itself, in menstrual cycle imbalances and things like that. um, but one of the main reasons that we have that is liver stagnation, and that comes from a big influencing factor of that is our suppression of many important emotions, specifically anger and frustration. And we're taught as womb bearers, as women, and everyone really is taught that it's not okay to be angry and to express your anger, and we're not taught healthy ways of relating to our own understandable anger, about life and with other people and in our communities. And anger is a really healthy emotion, actually, when something's going on that's not right, when something's going on that's harming us. It it's a powerful energy that arises within us to implement change, if we know how to work with it. And but we're taught to that it's not okay to speak up about what's not right, that we're taught to suppress that anger. And and suppressing anger goes hand in hand with liver stagnation. And so the liver plays an important role in first of all filtering our blood, so filtering toxins out of our blood. It also what it does with those toxins is it transforms toxins from our blood into bile, a useful substance that helps us to digest our food properly. So when the liver is fully flowing, any toxins that come through, anything that's not right, gets transformed into something useful. And that's exactly what anger does for us. It transforms a situation that's not right, that possibly has toxic components Our anger has the power to transform that situation into something that gives us greater wisdom, or a better situation. We can digest the richness of life. And so this is, I talk about this a lot with the liver and processing the toxins. And and that's how we can have enough healthy blood to nourish all the organs in our body, especially the womb. That's how our digestion can be the healthiest, is if we have this liver that's fully flowing and not stagnant. And that requires us to have a healthy flowing relationship with emotions like anger and frustration. And so I wanted to bring this up because the liver stagnation can definitely be something that influences skin health. Because if the liver is backed up with toxins, and is stagnant, is being suppressed in its function because of lifestyle choices that we might make, not getting enough sleep at the right times of the day, not drinking enough water, not getting enough exercise and movement, which I'm sure you talk about with your clients all the time, that all of those things support or hinder the healthy functioning of the liver. And when the liver isn't functioning, then the body has other ways of getting rid of toxins. One of them saying, okay, skin, biggest organ in the body, biggest organ of elimination in the
Yeah.
body, bigger than our bowels, bigger than everything else, our digestive tract. Okay, we're going to get these toxins out of here somehow.
Yeah.
So skin erupts with rashes, acne, eczema, psoriasis,
Yeah.
all of these eruptions to get rid of the backed up toxins. And um, and and also, when the liver is stagnant, it's not supporting healthy digestion,
Yes.
so we're not getting the nutrients we need to for all of our organs to function healthily. And so I'm curious if which parts of what I just talked about relate to how you coach your clients towards better skin health. If we can, perhaps you can weave our stories together, and perhaps you talk to your people about the liver. I don't know. I'd love to hear about it.
Yes, thank you so much for sharing that. And I was just about to go into the function of the liver, but I couldn't have said it more eloquently as what you just did, and in such a great description of what the liver does. And ultimately, I think if people understand the function and the purpose of what the liver does, then we can understand the correlation between skincare and our internal organs. And so with you saying that, I just wanted to share myself, going through, I've recently just been going through a little bit of journaling and affirmations for myself. And I realized that guilt was something that I held a lot to. And going back to your talk about the liver and anger, I, I once went to a treatment, and somebody was working on me, and she also kind of looked into the internal organs, and she said, "Oh, you have a little inflammation in your liver, that tells me you're holding on to a lot of guilt." And at that time, I didn't think anything of it. I'm like, "Oh, do I didn't realize." But what I learned is that when we are in the womb, so before we become full human beings and come out of the body, it is the same cell that creates our brain and our skin. And so, what people don't realize, and most of the time, clients come in and they treat their skin, in particular to their face, as something completely different from their body. And so, I oftentimes always explain to my clients, if you are having something like liver stagnation, and to make it in more layman's terms so that people understand, things are going on in their lives that don't allow them to have a full circulation of releasing toxins, blood circulation, oxygenation in the blood, things like that, then there will be a manifestation in the skin. So huge examples are like eczema, psoriasis, or acne, or sallowness, wrinkles, things like that. And so I love this topic because when clients come to me, they tend to just look at beauty as vanity, but there is such an importance without actually taking care of their body. So issues that are going on with their skin that causes them to not sleep enough, to not be able to feed themselves healthy, nourishing foods. Stress alone can throw our hormones out of balance. Not understanding and being aware of those effects that it can cause to our body. There's nothing we can do topically that can really fix the core issue that they have, because just not being able to absorb, just your skin not being able to properly absorb what it is that it needs to help, or being able to absorb the nutrition from foods that we eat. So it is hugely, hugely important that clients understand and people understand that when we want to have healthy skin, it really starts from either the internal organs or our mental health, because as I mentioned, stress and fear and guilt and anger, that all manifests. And something that I also personally learned is something called the meridian channels, that doesn't often get talked about. And meridian channels is exactly what you mentioned, how the liver kind of filters out the blood and sends healthy bile or healthy oxygenated blood to certain parts of the body. That's what goes through our meridian channels, right? So that meridian channel, if we don't have healthy receptors, meaning the liver or the skin or the heart or the lung, that meridian channel gets backed up. So toxins get clogged. And over time, as we know in health, when there's inflammation in the body, that over time is what causes illnesses and diseases.
Mhm.
And it could be small ones, just like a little rash, or major ones where it could be something like cancer or, heart issues. And so that's why it's so important that we educate our clients to really pay attention to the little signals that our body gives to us. So, you know, going back to you asking me my story, did I realize before that what was going on with my skin was correlation to what was going on internally? I didn't until I started to pay attention. And I ask my clients to do this all the time. Pay attention to the little signals, even though it might not seem like it's anything. It can manifest. It could be little, notes that your body is telling you that this is something you need to put more focus on, be it some pain, headaches that a lot of people live with headaches, and they just think, oh, I'm just not hydrating enough, or they kind of ignore it. But that can be, signs that your body's trying to communicate to you. So that's a dialogue I have with my clients all the time. And my job is to really, every time something happens, I go through this over and over again, because it's easy to forget. We will spend that time to realize, okay, I think I've just been stressed because of this job. And then they don't realize that, like, maybe their two children being stuck at home doing Zoom, online distance learning is another stressor. So we tend to focus on taking care of one thing. We're not multitaskers by nature, we just are forced to do it. And we forget to take a look around to see what else are stressors and how we can really alleviate that stress and what is healthy for us. And even allowing ourselves to take care of ourselves and do self-care. I think a lot of people don't feel that they have the right to do self-care because there's a bajillion other things that they have to care for. Women in particular, we are just master multitaskers now, even though that's not what we naturally should be doing. So
Yeah, and there's a lot of systems and structures set up in our lives and in our society that sort of mandate that constantly working all the time, and we've been indoctrinated to disregard our body's signals for the need for self-care, and for to disregard, and just like we've been indoctrinated to disregard our anger, which, if you look at inflammation, it means something's inflamed, which, if you look at what that word means, fire, right?
mhm. Yep.
It's inflamed, it has flame to it, right?
Mhm.
It's
Yep.
on fire a little bit, right? And
Mhm.
of all the emotions, which one would we associate most with fire? Anger.
Ang-
So when we push that anger down and we don't listen to the message of the anger, and we don't let the fire of that anger make a transformation in our life, then we stuff that fire down, and it goes somewhere. It doesn't just get snuffed out. The heat of that fire is still there, and it causes inflammation.
Right.
And especially combined with that stagnation of the liver and the impaired ability to process the toxins, that both physical and emotional, that might be going on. And so um I tend to get quite sociopolitical when we talk about this, because so many of the systems in our lives are set up for a very few wealthy elite people to be exploiting everybody else for their egregiously embarrassing wealth and luxury.
Yeah.
And all of the indoctrination all the education that most of us have experienced has been deliberately aimed at making us exploitable for those wealthy elite.
Yes.
So having us in the habit of not caring for ourselves, placing our work and our professional lives as the most important thing, and chasing, always having to chase after money, and be a worker in the whole system and not caring for ourselves, um, sort of serves those purposes not sustainably by any means. And actually, businesses who encourage and support everyone who is in the business to be really healthy and taking really good care of themselves, those businesses ultimately are more economically successful than businesses that are exploiting their workers to death.
Yes, I absolutely agree. And beyond that, I think the move towards taking care of this earth.
There,
So
right there. Next topic.
yeah, because we, just like what you just talked about, there's a certain group that just kind of sucks the energy out of everybody else. We as human beings suck the resources out of this entire planet. And so I think that it's so important for everybody, big and small, every company, big and small, from the top of the chain to mid tier at any level, to have the conversation of preservation and how we can really get back to nourishing this planet, which then can nourish us as human beings, and really correct the systems that have been ignoring these big issues. I think a lot of times we as one person, we feel small, we feel tiny, and in the grand scheme of things in the universe, we are one tiny little speckle. But there's so much power in knowledge and spreading awareness, so that as a whole we can achieve preservation of this planet and humankind for many, many more generations, and being able to adapt and learn the changes. I think a lot of the issues is that most people are afraid to change. People like to be comfortable in where they're at, even though they know, the parent now, given what's going on in the current political situation, people know, even if they know that they're going down the wrong path, they tend to want to stay put, because they're so afraid of change. And so, yeah, it's this is a greater conversation, and it is so needed right now, um, beyond just for my clients and how to take care of themselves, because without our health, that job we're not going to do well on. We're not going to be good models for our children. We won't be able to take care of them well. As the cliche saying, put the oxygen mask on yourself first before you put it on somebody else. And we really have to bring it back around. And I think that's the silver lining of this pandemic, is turning the focus inwards and realizing the importance of the core of what we're made of as human beings biologically, and then environmentally as well.
Yeah. Yeah, it's really fundamental to my work as a womb-centered healing practitioner and the biomystical womb healing work that I'm writing about and creating programs around, to recognize that there's a fundamental shift in how we relate to our bodies, how we relate to life itself, and the source of life itself in the womb. That we have this great source of life regeneration within us, whether we have children or not. It's still a biological model of how we can be life generating beings instead of life exploiting beings. And instead of using up life until it's all used up and dead, we can be regenerating and giving back to life and continuing and participating and giving to the cycle of life as much as, or perhaps more than what we take. So having a partnership relationship with life itself instead of a domination relationship with life itself uh, needs to be the direction that we move in order to heal from these collective challenges that we're all experiencing. And that translates into how we look at our skin, how we look at our menstrual cycle, and how we relate to our body and our life and our relationships, how we relate to each other. So, for example, how you relate to your clients, how I relate to my clients. Are we telling them that we're the expert and we know better than them what they should do, and being an authority and telling them what to do and dominating the relationship? Or are we inviting them into a partnership relationship and inviting them to learn and listen to their own inner wisdom and learn how to care for themselves, and encouraging them and sharing our expertise, certainly when we have more information or training than they might have, encouraging them to learn for themselves and to take responsibility for themselves. And so, when we're working in professional world, we can choose what kind of relationships we're having. Are we buying into that same sort of authoritarian domination based relationship? We know where that goes. We've seen where that,
Yeah.
or are we coming into partnership? And this is an important evolutionary step for humanity, and microorganisms have had to take that step. We're only alive because microorganisms at one point in our evolutionary history decided to cooperate,
Yes.
work together, instead of continue to overconsume each other to the point of extinction.
Yes.
So we can learn from those very microorganisms that get all out of balance in our skin that you're having to deal with your clients, or in our gut or in our womb space, right? And so when they're in balance and harmony, and having a harmonious partnership relationship with each other, then we're healthy.
Yes.
And we get to learn from them and use those as biomystical models for our behavior. When we're in harmonious partnership relationships with each other, then we can be healthy. But if we're at war with each other, and over consuming and exploiting each other and dominating each other, that's when our society is unhealthy. So we didn't know we were going to go down that road on this conversation, did
I
we?
can't agree with you more. I know. I can't agree with you more. And yeah, this conversation definitely, became much bigger than we thought it would be. But I think the work that you're doing is so beautiful. And it is, I think we realize that it's there. We're just afraid to sometimes tap into it. Um, I, I'm sure so many people realize what is going on with their own bodies. They're too afraid to open the can of worms. But at the end of the day, I still always say knowledge is power, because knowledge will allow you the ability to make certain decisions. Um, and at the end of the day, whatever decision you make, that's the decision that you make. But it is a part of a greater conversation, and definitely needs to be talked about more, so that us as a society um, can start working with nature. Because at the end of the day, this pandemic really started because there was a war between nature and humankind. We didn't listen to what this planet was telling us.
Yeah,
um,
we didn't listen to the early signs, right? We
yeah,
didn't listen to the little rash behind the ear, or
yeah,
the small, although a lot of the signs have been getting bigger and bigger for quite some time, actually.
yeah,
But
yeah,
Mother Nature will balance things out, right? And if we don't listen, she'll balance things out in a big way. I mean, I live in a place in California where wildfire is a real thing every year. And it's like making people question the fire suppression that's gone on. I mean, I could get into a whole discussion about the ecology of fire. and
Yeah.
inflammation on a collective scale, right? Which really looks very similar to, okay, if you have a little inflammation, you might not notice it. But when you suppress that and don't pay attention to it, pretty soon you have big inflammation, right? Well, that's what we're dealing with on a collective scale. And and so it's really essential that we more and more people start to listen, and that we have these kinds of conversations, that that we share what we're waking up to as individuals and collectively, and encourage each other to take those scary steps to say, oh, I'm afraid to change, but the same old way, we can see where that's heading.
Absolutely. I,
Yeah.
I think I think when we see, for the most part, that we are not alone. I think that when we see camaraderie and we see, other people that we can relate to, other people's mindsets and habits, it makes it more doable and achievable. You know,
Yeah.
a lot of times I think everything seems so big that we can't, it's out of our reach. But when we kind of break it down into smaller um, chunks, it becomes more attainable. It becomes more attainable. And, going back to my profession of skincare, I always say, clogging happens for a reason. And that clogging, when the body decides that it doesn't want it there anymore, it goes into war. And then that's when a big pimple happens. So it always starts with, some kind of imbalance that caused the clogging. The clogging is a little signal. And then if you ignore that, then the body goes into war with it and it tries to push it out with inflammation and fire.
Mhm.
So, on a grander scheme, that's, the planet, and then on our skin, on a micro.
Right? We've got this whole microorganism community right here
Yeah.
on our skin and inside our belly, and it's the same, that's the biomystical approach is, okay, there's our biology and what's happening there, and that gives us a map or a guide or a symbolic representation of what's happening in the collective realms and in the ecology of life, and in our community, in our human community, and in our society, um, is often very much parallel mirroring of that, so you just made the parallel between pimples and war.
I know. It's weird when I tell clients that, but for some reason they almost automatically understand it.
They can tell, they can feel the war
You
going
can feel
on.
the war. Yeah.
Oh my goodness. Well, thank you so much for having such a delightful, informative, educational conversation here. If folks wanted to get in touch with you, how could they do so?
Yeah, so you can definitely find me on all social media platforms like Facebook and Instagram. The handle for my spa is at Anita B Spa, and then my personal one is at Anita B Beauty. And that on there we share a lot of tips on skincare. On my personal one, I am sharing my work that I'm doing with affirmations and journaling, because I talk about healthy mindset that helps us with healthy skincare. So there, and then of course the website anitabspa.com, you'll be able to find me and continue on this conversation. And Salma, once again, your topics and your conversation is so important, and I really thank you for having this and spreading the message around.
Thank you so much for joining us on the show, Anita. And listeners, if you're new to the podcast, or perhaps you've listened before, I'll share a reminder that if you want to learn more about my work, you can visit wombcenteredhealing.com. And you can also join the Womb Centered Healing Temple community on Facebook. There's a Facebook group of that name. Um, if you sign up for the newsletter on the website, you'll get a free womb listening MP3 meditation, which is a lovely way to start or to nourish your practice of listening to your inner wisdom, like we discussed on this show, and deepening that practice and centering on the womb, which is our the center of our life generative abilities. And so, if these topics have inspired you or intrigued you, I encourage you to sign up for that and take some time for that womb listening practice and reach out and let us know how that feels to you. All right, take good care. That's all for now. Until next time.